These are the 7 Codex skills that I use every single day as a professional AI engineer. If you spend a lot of time online, you might be thinking that you need hundreds of different skills and complex plugins to be productive with AI coding agents. But I think the opposite is true. You just need a small number of high-quality skills to do the majority of your work. So in this video, I'm going to show you the skills I use every single day on professional AI projects, including how to plan out your work, implement your code, and review the quality of that code. All of the skills that we talk about in this video, I'm going to link for free in the description below so you can download them and check them out yourself. So it's worth mentioning that although this is a video on Codex, you can use these skills with any AI coding agent. I use a combination of Claude Code and Codex day to day, but I find I'm using Codex more and more often in my day-to-day work, especially professional project work. I tend to be using Codex more often, but you can use these skills with any coding agent. All right, so let's get into it. Most people are probably familiar with skills, but if you're not, a skill is just a markdown file. It's a way to package up your knowledge in a way that an agent can do a task repeatedly. So if you find yourself doing something repeatedly, rather than having to prompt an agent every time, you can encode that knowledge into a skill. This improves consistency and improves quality over time. One of the biggest headaches I've had with skill management in general is if you're working with lots of terminal coding agents, if you're working with Claude Code and OpenCode, Codex, you're jumping between these different coding platforms. It can be really frustrating because you end up with skills scattered all over the place. It can get really messy really quickly. I like to have a minimal number of skills. I don't like to have too many installed. And so this is a really great way to manage your skills. It's a CLI tool that you can use to install skills. I'll just quickly show you how this works. So the way I like to manage skills is using this npx command. You can store all of your skills in GitHub and then use the following CLI commands to basically install your skills in the right location. This is great because it deals with the different coding agent problem I mentioned earlier. So this will put all of the skills in the right directories for Claude Code, Codex, or whatever coding agent you're using. So this is the best way I found to manage skills. It's also very good at updating skills as well. So all you need to do is give it the name of a GitHub repo. And you'll see here now we can select the skills we want to install. Typically, I will install all of them, but you can just select 1 or 2 of them if you want. And then if you press enter, you can choose the coding agents you want to support. By default, this will support Codex, but you can also add other coding agents if you want. And you can go ahead and install it either at the project level. So this will be installed only in your current project, or you can install it at the global level. So any project, any time you start Codex, those skills will be available. I'm going to install these skills globally because I use them all the time. You can see here that the way these are installed is with a symlink. This means that the skills are kept in one location, which makes them easy to manage and update, and then they're just linked to other directories for other coding agents. All right, so when you're in the Codex app, there are a couple of ways you can invoke skills. Skills get invoked dynamically by agents when they're needed, but you can also explicitly invoke them as well, which is very useful. Sometimes skills, for whatever reason, don't get triggered by the agent, and so you can actually manually invoke them. You can actually look through all of the skills you have installed. You can see here I have a bunch of skills pre-installed already. So the first skill we're going to take a look at is the Spec skill. So if you're familiar with spec-driven development, the idea here is that we take a general idea, a rough idea of what we want to build, and then we create a high-quality design document that contains information about the requirements, what are we building and why are we building it. Also some other information such as how are we actually going to implement that code. This is a great way to build alignment between you and the agent and to make sure the agent is building the right thing. So let's just jump over into Codex. So what I'm going to do is build a new feature in this project. The feature is less important. It's more the process that matters here. So I've got a rough idea for what I want to build. I'm going to paste in a rough prompt. I'm just roughly describing what I want to build. And I'm asking Codex to create a spec for me. So this is going to create a document that I can then review and iterate on with the agent so that we can get a really clear understanding of what we're actually trying to build. So you can see here, Codex has now created the spec, so we can go through and read it. So we've got a description of what we're building. So make tasks portable across multiple workers. We've got some context about how it currently works. We've got links to relevant code that the agent can refer to. Now we've got the requirements. So what I would typically do is go through this spec. I would add comments, I would make changes, iterate on it, refine it basically. You can see here we have the data model. We can review all of this before we actually hand it off to be built, which will prevent a lot of rework later on. What you can see here is how much detail there is in these specifications. So there are, like I said, there are so many micro decisions you need to make when building software. This is a great way to make those assumptions explicit, and it allows you to identify where the agent has misunderstood something or you haven't been clear enough. This is generally an iterative process. Normally, the agent will generate the first spec. You will look through the spec, find any errors, and then fix or improve them. The next skill we're going to look at is the plan skill. The idea of the planning skill is to basically take the spec that we just generated and then break it down into smaller units of work. So if you're building software, you don't typically ask an agent to go build an entire application because it will rush through the process. There are so many mistakes that are going to happen along the way. It's far better to break that down into logical chunks that you can review, iterate on with the agent. So essentially what this will do is it will take a plan or a spec or basically any kind of description of what you want to do, and then it will break that down into a number of discrete tasks that can be executed. And the way I do this is to store these tasks in an issue tracker, and I'll quickly show you how to do that. Can you use the plan skill to break down that spec into a number of tickets? And then can you push all of those tickets into GitHub issues so that we can work on them one by one? So this is going to use the GitHub CLI to push up these tasks to GitHub issues. This also works if you're working with any other task tracker like Linear or Jira or whatever you're using. You can use the same approach. I really like this way of working with agents. It allows you to stay clear about what's going on. It's much easier to track status of all of the different things your agents are doing through some kind of task tracker than it is to do that through Markdown files. All right, so now we've created the issues. In theory, I should be able to go to GitHub and check these out. You can see here the agent has now linked me to all of those tickets. So this is the plan, basically. So we took that large spec and we've broken it down into a number of smaller tasks. One of the goals when creating tasks for agents is to make sure that you provide all of the information that the agent would need to complete the task. So if you imagine you're delegating work to someone in your team, you'd want to give them all of the information that they need to do the work successfully. You don't want to give them half the information because they're not going to be able to do a good job. So there was a great article on X recently which went pretty viral, which was about the unreasonable effectiveness of HTML. The general idea is that agents are typically used to generate Markdown files, but actually HTML is a much richer source of information, especially for us reading. So I took this idea and I turned it into a skill. This is called the Explain Visually skill. And what it does, it will take any architecture, any code repo, any document, anything at all really, and it will turn it into a HTML page that describes it in clear detail. So first thing we do is understand whatever we're looking at, and then we outline what we need to know about that topic, and then we build a HTML page. This is an example of the output of the skill. You can see here we have a cheat sheet for agent skills. This describes what agent skills are, how they work at a high level. We've got some nice looking diagrams. We've got a breakdown of some best practices, how they work. We've got the front matter, all of the best practices basically around creating skills. So this is just a super useful skill. If you're ever trying to understand a concept, if you're trying to understand how a project works or learn more about a topic, having a visual explanation I find super helpful. I'm definitely a visual learner, so this really helps me. So the next skill I want to show you is one of my recent additions, which is called Clarify. This is somewhat based on the Grill Me skill, which has gone pretty viral lately. But the idea here is we often use voice dictation to talk to agents, and those instructions can get very, very confusing. They can often be contradictory. They can be very vague and just generally confusing. So the goal of this skill is to help clarify your thinking when you're talking to an agent, and then it will generate a high quality, clear prompt as the output. And so you get a vague description going in and you get a high quality optimized prompt coming out. I'll quickly show you the Clarify skill in action. So the idea here is I'm just going to talk to the agent, brain dump a bunch of random instructions that are very unclear and confusing, and then ask the agent to help me tidy up those instructions into a very clear prompt at the end. So I'm just brain dumping something very confusing, very ill-structured, very vague. And now the agent is going to use the Clarify skill to help refine what we're actually asking for. Okay, so now the agent has come back with some feedback. It's listened to my request. It's tried to understand it. So I'm just going to work through these questions step by step until the agent understands what I'm actually looking for. And then we're going to get a prompt at the end of it. All right, so you can see now I've gone through and answered a bunch of questions. And what we have now is a clear prompt that we can either execute now or we can save it and refine it. But you can see here the big difference between the very vague set of instructions I gave initially and the very, very clear prompt we have here. So this is a night and day difference to where we started. You'll notice that I was just talking very incoherently at the start, just randomly asking for stuff. I didn't really know what I wanted. And now what we have is a very, very clear set of instructions that an agent can then go and execute. I think this is a really useful skill if you want to get clear on your thinking and if you want to produce higher quality prompts, especially when working with voice dictation. So the next skill I want to show you is the address PR feedback skill. This is one of my favorites. It's a really simple idea, but previously I was doing a lot of local code review and that was time consuming. So what I tend to do now is I let the agent push up to GitHub and then I run a bunch of automated checks on GitHub to do code review. So you can use Copilot, you can use Codex or Claude to automatically do a code review whenever you open a pull request. And then the goal of this skill is basically to go through all of the feedback you get on a pull request address the code changes, fix everything, make sure we're not blindly accepting any kind of feedback or comments on the PR, only fixing things that we actually need to fix. So we have a PR here. So I've opened this code change. Deliberately, I've added a bug. But you can see here, we've got some comments on the code. So this is like a bug, basically. So we've got a bunch of issues that we need to go and fix. All right, so now we've got a bunch of comments on our pull request. Let's try and fix those with Codex. Can you pull down all of the comments from the pull request and go and fix them using the address PR feedback skill? All right, so now hopefully we're going to invoke the right skill, which is the address PR feedback skill. We're going to run the workflow. We're going to use the GitHub CLI to fetch all of the comments. Then we're going to go and fix any issues. We're going to push those back up, and we're also going to comment back on the tickets to make sure that the reviewer knows we've closed them. So now when we go back to the pull request, you can see that not only has the issue been addressed, but we've also commented back on here to say, this is fixed in this particular commit. We've also commented here to say this is also fixed. And we just responded to the comment, which is just general good practice and it's polite. Maybe not when you're working with AI agents, but when you're working with real people, you definitely want to actually respond to their comments. They put a lot of time into the code review. And so this is just a great way to not only speed up the review process, improve the quality, but you can also automate a lot of tedious work within your workflow. Another skill I like to use a lot is the refactor skill. This is a simple idea. Basically, whenever you write code, the first time the agent writes the code, there's normally something that can be improved in the code. That could be simplifying the logic. It could be removing duplication. It could be saying the same things in fewer lines of code, stuff like that. Basically, just improving the code. And this skill is what I use to do that. In Claude Code, there's already a built-in skill called, I believe it's simplify. And this is basically the same idea, but applicable to basically any agent. This is really good if you want to keep the quality high on all of your projects. Very, very simple skill, but it's got a lot of value. I'll just show you how this works in action. So I've just asked the agent, even though what I'm showing you now is like a fake PR, I just made it for demonstration purposes. So there wasn't actually much code to review. But even in this really tiny example, when we asked it to run the refactor skill and then tell us what we improved, you can see here that the agent did actually find some small things to improve. Let's take a look at what it did. So even though this was a trivial bit of code, it was a really small change, the agent was still able to find areas where it could improve the code. So I think this kind of just goes to show how important iteration is within your development process. Never blindly accept the output of an agent. Almost always there are things that are wrong or could be improved. This is the skill that I use to make sure that I'm always improving the quality of my code. So the next skill I want to show you is the design doc skill. This is a really traditional way of writing software. So normally when we build software, especially at a large scale within a team, an engineer, especially a senior engineer in companies like Amazon and Google, they'll normally write some kind of design doc. The reason for this is that the cost of changing code in production is very, very high. So whenever you build anything significant that could have major impact on customers, you always want to have a design and you always want to review and improve that design. So this is a great article here on how Google write design docs. It's pretty simple. Basically, a design doc will have context and scope. So basically, what are we doing and why are we doing it? What are the goals of this code change? Like, why are we building this new feature? What's the actual goal? What's not in scope? We then normally have a section which talks about the actual design. Typically, we'll have diagrams of how everything fits together. Then we'll talk about the APIs, the storage, all of that kind of stuff, basically. So I put together a skill that helps you write these design docs really easily. So write a lightweight architecture design doc for a decision that deserves thinking before code. This is different to a spec. The goal of this design doc is to help you as an engineer or other people in your team think carefully through a design. This is not a design doc necessarily for an agent. So that's why this is different to a spec. This is an example of the kind of thing you might find in a design doc. You can see here we have a detailed overview of what we're trying to build. You can see here we have a high-level architecture diagram. So this kind of detail would take a person hours and hours to construct. You can now use these to share within your team, to have a discussion about the architecture of your project, or for you as a solo developer to really think through carefully about what you're actually building. At the end of the day, agents help us write code, but they can't help us think clearly. This is one of the ways you can think more clearly about your design. So the skills I find most useful tend to be the ones that I use most often. So anything that maps to a particular workflow, so things you do every single day on every single project, those are really great candidates for skills. For example, breaking down tasks, writing particular documents, things like that. So those are the things where I find skills to be most useful. All of the skills that we talked about in this video are going to be linked in the description below for free, so you can download them and check them out yourself. If you've got any comments or you've got any suggestions for skills I missed, I'd love to hear about them. I'm always looking to learn about new skills. So let me know in the comments if you've got any skills that you find particularly useful. Thanks again for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. It means a ton to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Do you want to be on camera? Do you want to be on the video?